If I had to describe Final Fantasy VII, I would describe it as a beautiful, chaotic story. And I've held this topic off for such a long time because I was playing Final Fantasy VII for the first time. And going into it, I see that obviously it's an outstanding game for it being still popular to this day. Originally, when I first got into the Final Fantasy VII universe, I got into the remake first. So I played Final Fantasy VII Remake, and mind you, this was before Rebirth. I think it was just announced, and that was at the time that I played Remake. Going into it, it was an absolutely beautiful experience, but when I started to play Final Fantasy VII, the original game from 1997, I think it's 97, but I may be wrong, I don't know. But I'm sure it's the 90s, obviously. When I first started playing that game, I was like, ooh, this is pretty good. So I was like kind of expecting some things that I had already seen in the remake, which was, really nice touchback, and like how it was more different, obviously, because it was more like Polygon-esque for like the models of the characters, and the fighting styles were a lot different. It was more RPG based, and it was hard to get used to that in the beginning. If you are new to the franchise and you don't want any spoilers, I would suggest clicking off this video now, because I'm going to be talking about a lot of spoilers, because I just recently finished Final Fantasy VII for the first time, and it was an absolute masterpiece of a story. So going further into this story, I come to figure out that Midgar is just a small piece of the entire story, and it goes much further in depth than just Avalanche and trying to beat Shinra, because they're just using Mako energy to manipulate all of society, of humanity, realistically. It goes much further in depth about how Mako energy and the ancients come into play, and you find out that Aerith is an ancient. That's something you find out in the remake as well, but it doesn't really go in depth into the remakes. So I haven't played Rebirth yet, but I can imagine it goes much further in depth about the ancients and what their sole purpose to the world is, because once you leave Midgar, you're trying to chase after Sephiroth for the most part. Every single character has such a diverse effect into the main story. You come to find out that Cloud, for one, isn't really who he is, and Aerith in the original game even says, I really want to know who the real you is. And that really felt strange when she first mentioned that sort of statement towards Cloud, especially when they go to the Golden Saucer for the first time in the original. I just thought that was kind of strange. But the more you get into the story, and eventually you have the black materia that comes into play, and eventually Sephiroth conjures Meteor, which becomes a very drastic problem for the entire world, because it could literally end the entire world. And not only that, the birth of Weapon as well, because they have the reunion. The story's so convoluted, but I feel like that chaotic mess is what makes this story so beautiful. For one, this game is roughly 35 hours long if you are just trying to complete a lot of stuff and, get all the characters, get Yuffie, get Vincent, get pretty much all the characters, and also all the materia and other side quests that you could do in this game, such as beat Weapon right before you are going to face Sephiroth for the last time. Don't even get me started, because I would say that, people have different kinds of ships in this game, but the one that I stand by the most, even though I'm wearing a Tifa shirt, is definitely Aerith and Cloud. I feel like their dynamic is so heavenly. They, for one, don't really know who they are, truly. And as the story progresses, you find out that Cloud was just a clone of Sephiroth, of Genova, and it's sort of like flips the head on the coin of what was his purpose in the first place. Well, he wasn't just a clone, and that's something you figure out after you find out that Aerith dies in the game. I am not ready to see that remastered if it is in Rebirth, because that moment was really, really sad for me. I absolutely love Aerith, her character, and I feel like it's very symbolic of how she dies, because she dies in a way that obviously she gets stabbed by Sephiroth, and that little orb that you find out that she dropped into the water into the live stream is actually a materia in of itself, and you don't realize that until you get to the end of the game. And that's so freaking crazy that it's just so subtle but has so much power to it. And you find out that materia is wholly the only thing that can actually stop meteor from destroying the earth, but purifies all the Mako energy, the corrupt Mako energy that Shinra has built up. It's like cleansing the world of sin, realistically, and it has so much biblical connotations into it that just works so well with the game. This masterpiece has survived in popularity for such a long time, and I always wondered why that was. Like about a year ago, I started playing the remake, and that ends where they leave Midgar, and then that's just it. And I thought originally going into the original Final Fantasy VII that they would just stop once they leave Midgar, and that was it. But no, I was completely wrong. Everything that's after that is just so freaking good that I cannot wait to see remastered in Rebirth. And I would assume that Rebirth ends with Aerith dying, which, you know, if I am right about that, I hope that the comment section of this video, please don't spoil what happens at the end of Rebirth, please, because I know that it's not the end of the game, because mind you, this game in of itself is 35 hours long, so there's no way they could end it in Rebirth. Obviously, for myself, I would assume that they're gonna break this into 2 more parts, and that those 2 more parts will be the end of the game. But even then, after Final Fantasy VII, they come out with this movie, which was released back in 2005, and I didn't even know about this. And it sort of has that, if you've ever played Kingdom Hearts, it has those like secret ending sort of style cutscenes, which was pretty cool in a movie sense. And it happens after the events of Final Fantasy VII, where Holy sort of cleanses the world of all the corrupt Mako energy that was corrupting the world, and essentially it restarted the world. And then you have remnants of Sephiroth that come back to try and become Sephiroth again, which, you know, they somewhat do, but Cloud puts an end to it. I would highly recommend the movie if you guys have played the original game. I like the biblical references in how Cloud, he cleanses the orphan boy by dipping him into the water, sort of symbolic of baptism, which was pretty cool in of itself. The corruption just being rid away by the water that came from Aerith, I would assume. There's many symbolic points where they mistaken Aerith for being Mother, which is Genova. The ending where you have Aerith and Zack doesn't even play that much of a big role in the original Final Fantasy VII, and so you wonder what that character was like, because originally he was the one that went to Cloud's old town where Tifa was once living. You know, you have so much depth, and I barely scratched the surface of what this game has to offer. When you boil it down to its finest core, you have lovable characters, you have many good cutscenes, which, you know, from the original game, there were so many cool cutscenes in that game, and I give credit to Tetsuya Nomura for really creating such a beautiful universe. And I have played a lot of the Kingdom Hearts franchise, and when I was playing the original Final Fantasy VII, I felt like there was hints of Kingdom Hearts 1 in that game, which, going from the soundtrack, going from the cutscenes, there was just so many implications of like how Kingdom Hearts was influenced by Final Fantasy. And I would rate the Final Fantasy original definitely a 10 out of 10. There's a reason why it's held on for so long. Originally, when I played the remake, Aerith is still my favorite girl in this game. Like Jessie, she gets the short end of the straw in the original Final Fantasy VII, but they really definitely bring her out in the remake. But I would say that in the original, I really liked Tifa's story, but I didn't really like her that much in the remake, surprisingly. But I did at the same time. I kind of had like a relationship with Tifa, because, you know, she's been there for Cloud ever since they were children. They have memories together, but you find out that that's sort of like in Cloud's clouded memory that Hojo sort of creates that figment of imagination in Cloud. I start to love Tifa more as the game progresses in the original Final Fantasy VII, and I would say that my favorite scene with Tifa, you would expect it to be the Golden Saucer, because in the original you get either you can go with Tifa or Aerith on the gondola thing. I forgot what it's called. I got Aerith, but I know that you can get Tifa as well. But I like the ending part right before they go to fight Sephiroth for the last time. Tifa and Cloud sort of have a moment alone. Cloud says to everyone, hey, you need to find out why you're fighting for this world. It's not just for revenge, just because Shinra has corrupted it. Because we are fighting to really save the world. And that's something that all of the characters reflect over. And I loved how Barrett also reflected over this, because he, for one, was out to get Shinra, out for revenge, and he didn't realize that, wait, I actually did hurt a lot of people with that first Mako reactor explosion. That affected so many lives, and I did not realize that. And it was just a moment of reflection that, yeah, Barrett says he was wrong for that. And not only that, but Marlene in of itself is a character that you didn't really know who her parents were. But then you find out that Barrett is taking care of her because her mom and dad died. Literally, like, it's so sad, but at the same time, there's so much love to all of these characters, and each one have their own discrepancies and their own flaws, including Yuffie as well. You know, even Yuffie is a character that you find out that her dad doesn't really trust her because she doesn't really have that much skill. She eventually proves herself with that tower of different enemies you have to fight to get to the top, where she herself has to face off against her dad to earn Leviathan, which I found to be very cool. I love that sort of story, how it worked in par with making Yuffie such a stronger character. And I can't wait to see that kind of stuff in Rebirth. I've only watched Advent Children. All of the characters in of themselves have such a unique story, including Red, which was one of my underrated favorite characters. He has a story about him and his father and how he's just a kid in comparison to the old man that you speak with. You eventually find out that his dad was actually a savior of their town rather than being seen as this disgraceful warrior, but realistically he sacrificed himself for the town, which is really cool, and that moment was sentimental as well. And you eventually find out that Sephiroth was actually killed, and there's so much going into the story. Like, I've only touched the tip of the iceberg with this story. There's so much more to the reunion, but at the end of the day, Final Fantasy VII is a story about having faith and having hope for people that have lost themselves in their way, to help guide them back, to stick out for your partner, because maybe things aren't always as they seem, and there's so much more. Once you find out the truth, you find out that you're just only being naive, and that's really what the story has taught me. It's a beautiful story about flawed characters that eventually learn what was wrong with the world and make things right, and that's something that I really do praise Final Fantasy VII for. It's definitely a game that has stood the test of time, deserves so much praise for how much it's worth. My overall thoughts on Final Fantasy VII, it's a story that I will remember forever, and that's something that I'll hold on to forever. And I wish I could have played it during the 90s. From a kid that's grown up with 90s games, I wish I could have played it even in the early 2000s. I would not play it for the faint of heart, because there's so much to do in that game that you will be lost in it forever. The game was really challenging at the same time, but also very fun. I hope that this video somewhat becomes a little bit mainstream, because I really did enjoy this game, and I would highly recommend it to anyone to play. I have been Noble Oath. Feel free to like, subscribe, comment down below your guys' thoughts and opinions. And with that being said, I will see you guys in the next one. Take care, and peace.